Om Nityam Shuddham Nirabhasham Nirakaram Niranjanam Nityabodham Chidanandam Gurum Brahma Namamyaham. Eternal, pure, unlimited, formless, spotless, omniscient and blissful, we bow down to the Supreme Lord in the form of the Guru. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurudeva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we're entering into the next verse in the Verses of the Encomium, and this set has to do with meeting the Guru. And let me pull up the verses so we can take a look at them. So our seer, our divine seer here, has been traversing the worlds, and particularly this one, and he's come across the threefold miseries and their various pitfalls, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about those, and then discovered the ultra-cosmic trinity, which is Ishvara, Avatar, and Ishtam, and they came forth and really, really presented themselves to him as he engaged in ritual worship. The three alluring offerings of arati, puja, and devotional singing, bhajan. So this opened new eyes in him, and he looked at humanity, and he saw the different conditions, or we could say grades of beings. And this included uh, the jivas, the ones who are wandering ignorant in Maya, and the jivan muktas. It includes the nityasiddhas, and the Ishvara Kotis, and seeing that was a revelation to him. He noted all who suffered and then greatly perceived the four kinds of virtuous aspirants. And we may recall those from the Bhagavad Gita, that those are the devotees who call on the Lord to remove their suffering, to grant them wealth via righteous means and the ability to share it dharmically, use it dharmically, those who are seeking knowledge, and those who are the wise, as he says, those who simply love him. And then we went ahead and jumped ahead to verse 8 and just looked at the three designations of aspirants, which is a tantric teaching that talks about those devotees, and we're just talking about devotees here, who are still dealing with gross desires, and then those are called pasu. And then we talked, and the next one is virya, the heroic, who has got control of the mind, has discrimination, and can move about in the world in the midst of temptation, whereas pashu shouldn't be in the midst of temptation. They have to isolate themselves, kind of like the way we hear about, and Sri Ramakrishna used this example, that in the beginning, when you first plant a tree as a sapling, you have to fence it so that the goats and well, here in Hawaii, the pigs and also and the cows don't eat it up. But when it grows strong, then you can even tie an elephant to it. So, and then the third one is divya. And I think almost everybody here was present during Babaji's uh, class on Sunday. Let me just show really quickly a chart that we looked at then, and take a look at these Pashu, Virya, and Divya in the context of the chart that he showed on the hierarchy of existence. So this is a tantric teaching, and you might recall, okay, the hierarchy of existence starts with Paramashiva, and Paramashiva begins to have the universe projected by way of his parigraha shaktis called Bindu, or universal cause, and Maya, limiting force. And then the fivefold order develops. And I think we did this from the bottom up, but we'll take it from the most subtle on down to the presiding deities. And the important thing about this is that, see this dotted line? Everything about everyone above this dotted line, all these different kinds of beings are free of Maya, whereas the ones underneath are not free of Maya. So the Divya in this three designations of aspirants in Tantra, when they talk about the Divya is free of Maya. And if we need an example of such beings, just think of Sri Ramakrishna, think of Holy Mother, think of Swami Vivekananda, Ramana Maharshi. These kinds of beings are free of Maya and can, move about the different realms freely. But those who are still involved with Maya, still influenced with Maya, that's where we see the Pashu and the Virya. And you may remember that these mantrashvaras, they are those that make their progress through receiving the mantra. I think that's at least one of the meanings of this word. And they still have a sense of attachment to Maya, and they're under the control of Maya. And so they're classed as jivatmans. And they have three different designations, and Babaji took us through all of this, but now I want to relate it to those, Pashu and Virya, because Pashu is probably this one here, Sakala, and has a lot to work through still, but is still definitely a devotee, is a spiritual aspirant and is moving forward. And then there's these kind called pralaya kalas and vijnana kalas. And if we take a look here, we see that those who return after pralaya don't finish ripening their malas. Okay, this is a tantric term again, and this mala means an imperfection. And from the perspective of Tantra, it means that these are imperfections that we took on in order to sport, and eventually we will work through them and they'll drop off like fruits off of a tree that then allow us to see through the tree to the sky. So, sky of awareness. So, these pralaya kalas, we could call them viryas, but they don't get beyond Maya yet. They return after pralaya, which for those who don't know is the dissolution of the universe. And then all those that still have some skaras and karmas, or sacred business, we could say, with these three realms of transmigration, that they all come back. The ones who do it on purpose, they're, of course, free of Maya. They have that ability. But these pralaya kalas would be kind of like the viryas who don't finish perfecting themselves, don't quite make it to divya. Whereas the vijnana kalas, they gain liberation at pralaya. They may not get it right as they exit the body, but they will get it. They will finish their course of perfection through after pralaya. So they have matured those imperfections. So I just kind of wanted to bring that back to our attention so that we, remember the things that we learned in that series of classes. So here we are in verse 8 again. And shortly thereafter, I met my incomparable guru, who described to me the three designations of aspirants. And again, why is that important? Because an authentic teacher doesn't apply a one-size-fits-all set of practices to the disciple, to the students. There needs to be a relationship there. so that the between the guru and the disciple, and the guru can see into the disciple and decide what, as we'll see later on, what is their ideal, what should their mantra be, what is their practice, what practice should they take. And then over time, as the student continues in practice, uh, and begins to mature certain areas, the guru then will prescribe and suggest other kinds of practices. And sometimes a lot of this, here in the West, will have to do with those kinds of obstacles that arise in our spiritual life. We take those difficulties to the teacher, and he or she then, helps us adjust our perspective, how to view it, how to handle it, what to do, how to intensify our practice in the midst of that, and so forth. So we talked about those three designations last week, and the next sentence in this verse is very important. Conferring upon me, conferring upon me. So this contact with the guru confers upon the serious and sincere student these three necessary prerequisites. One of them they get when the guru accepts them and they accept the guru and take refuge there. Then along with that comes initiation and the mantra. Now this is really a very universal teaching. And so if we take it out of the context of India, I would just like to suggest that mantra in that case means method. There's plenty of other different traditions, religious traditions in the world that also use mantra, but maybe not all of them do. So, but the point is that the teacher confers upon you a method as well as initiation, taking hand, baptism, so forth, taking refuge. And thus one is established formally in the sacred path. Now, that's a very, very important statement as well. I'm formally established in the sacred path. And it calls to mind a teaching analogy that Sri Ramakrishna would use, where he talks about, if you are a citizen of a country, you're a citizen of a country, and you're moving about, and you can go from state to state, province to province, city to city, go all over your country. And, you're entitled to that. But what if you want to go outside your country? Then you need to get a visa. And when you land in that country, you have to get it stamped. So that's his analogy for what it takes to get beyond this earthly realm, to begin to go from the lower states of consciousness to the higher states of consciousness. We need help. We need the assistance of somebody who has done that and can guide us. And so I want to read a quote from Swami Vivekananda. He says, "This eye-opener of the aspirant after religion is the teacher. With the teacher, therefore, our relationship is the same as that between an ancestor and his descendant. Without faith, humility, submission, veneration in our hearts towards our religious teacher, there cannot be any growth of religion in us." And this is kind of a slap to westernized materialistic culture. He says, "It is a significant fact that where this kind of relation between the teacher and the taught prevails, there some gigantic spiritual people are growing, while in those countries which have neglected to keep up this kind of relation between the religious teacher with the religious teacher, let me start that again. While in those countries which have neglected to keep up this kind of relation, the religious teacher has become a mere lecturer, the teacher expecting their $5 and the person taught expecting their brain to be filled with the teacher's words, and each going their own way after this much has been done. And I would say that this is one of the really, really important reasons why for many years now, Babaji has really been emphasizing the importance of manana, that when we sit in class and we take those notes and we're listening and we're getting inspired by this idea or that idea, that we have to take it into meditation and meditate on it. Vivekananda stressed this very much. And actually, this is the primary practice in India. It's to hear the truth, roll it over in the mind, and then realize it. So, uh, there is this habit, and it comes out of the kind of uh, public and private school experience I think so many of us had, that we go to class and we're like little birds and we open our mouth and the teacher just drops in a bunch of facts and information. And maybe the teacher is doing it with absolute sincerity and desire to share this knowledge. But if the student holds the idea that, okay, I've done that, and let's go on to something else, it's not going to make a difference. And then crams for the final exam. Well, in spiritual life, our final exam is perhaps death in each lifetime. How are we going to meet death? Did we open our mouths, receive all of that, and then meditate on it, communicate with our teacher on how we were taking it in and how we were practicing it and how we were understanding it? Did we use it to gain peace of mind, equanimity of mind, to learn how to not be reactive with all the things that happen, to practice discrimination between the real and the unreal, and take to the real? So all of these things are what goes on when the teacher is transmitting from the place of love and wisdom, and the student is receiving it in like manner. So Swamiji continues, he says, under such circumstances, spirituality becomes almost an unknown quantity. There is no one to transmit it, and no one to have it transmitted to. Religion with such people becomes business. They think that they can obtain it with their dollars. So, yeah, probably some of us have encountered that and had this insight. So let's take up that first line in the verse. Shortly thereafter. Thereafter what? Encountering the threefold miseries, the ultra-cosmic trinity, performing the three alluring offerings which gave him contact or her contact with the ultra-cosmic trinity, and then joining the four kinds of virtuous aspirants and so forth. After that, what we are to assume, reading between the lines, is that our seer, our poet's yearning increased many, many fold, and the desire for spiritual practice increased many, many fold. And so that, like nothing else, attracts the guru. And the guru is nothing but the Ishtam in human form, is God in human form, meeting us where we are. So, yeah, so I want to share uh, some quotes that give us a feel for how important, how beautiful, how auspicious this is. So naturally, because, the greatest of all gurus are such beings as Jesus, Buddha, they're the greatest of the gurus, the teachers of all, the teachers of all teachers, and Sri Ramakrishna as well, and most recent. So I turn to his disciples. So Swami Brahmananda, he says, and for those of you who don't know who Swami Brahmananda was, he was a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. He was the first president of the Ramakrishna order, and especially significant, he was thought of as Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual son. I mean, in particular, all of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples and students were his children. In fact, all beings in the world are his children. Um, but this was a very special relationship. And it was the kind, if you can imagine, so much love between Sri Ramakrishna and his disciples that even when there was a special relationship, it created no jealousy among the others. Imagine. So Swami Brahmananda says, holy company is necessary. When one sees and hears holy people, spiritual feelings arise in the mind and doubts go away. That spiritual feelings arise just by being in their presence. So just by being in the presence of our teacher and beings similar to that, then we begin to imbibe the spirit of discrimination and detachment. So freedom from desires begins to be cultivated in us. So these spiritual feelings and longing for God, let's not forget that. Spiritual feelings arise in the mind and doubts go away. What kind of doubts? Doubts about whether or not spirituality can be experienced, whether it's real. Is God real? You know, when you have absolute faith in your teacher, and your teacher is a holy being and having direct spiritual communion with divine reality, then it takes away your doubts because there it is, proof in front of you. And one of the things you also get with a true and authentic teacher is the confidence that you can do it with yourself. Now that, I have to say that is a kind of confidence that in the beginning of spiritual life, as soon as we leave the teacher, that confidence may waver. And so that's why this holy company, spending our time again and again with the teacher, with the sincere Sangha, that this strengthens that confidence and we begin to really, really hear what the teacher is saying that removes our doubts. So as Swami goes on, one imbibes deeper impressions by observing a God-intoxicated life than by reading hundreds of books. And we'll read something from Swamiji in a minute about that. So Swami Advaitananda was also one of Sri Ramakrishna's direct disciples, and he was really special. He was an orphan and uneducated and was apparently destined for a life of servitude. And he became a house servant of one of Sri Ramakrishna's householder disciples. And when Sri Ramakrishna met him, he saw his purity and he needed an attendant and asked that householder disciple, if this young man could, Leto, he was called, could come stay with him and serve him. And of course, the householder disciple was delighted to do that. And so Swami Advaitananda became a companion of Avatar. And so one of the divine companions. And so he says, do you know that the master snatched me from the snares of the world? I was an orphan. He flooded me with love and affection. If he had not accepted me, I would have been like an animal, spending all my days working like a slave. My life would have been worth nothing. I am an unlettered man. He used to tell me, always keep your mind spotless. Don't allow impure thoughts to enter it. If you find such desires tormenting you, pray to God and chant his name. He will protect you. If the mind still will not remain calm, then go to the temple of the mother, that's Mother Kali, and sit before her, or else come here, pointing to himself, Sri Ramakrishna pointing to himself. So one of the things that I always remember about Swami Advaitananda is that Sri Ramakrishna early on chided him for falling asleep at night. He said, if you sleep at night, then when are you going to meditate on God? And so that's all Sri Ramakrishna needed to say to him. And he trained himself to stay up at night and to sleep during the day. So, yeah, very interesting story. So, in his book, Swami Vivekananda's book on Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion, he addresses, and this was back in the 1800s, and there was a real romance going on in the United States with um, philosophy and Eastern religion and science and all of this. He was working admittedly with the intelligentsia of the East Coast primarily. And so there was classical education there and um, you know, romantic poetry. When I say romantic, I mean sentimental, not necessarily romance. I don't mean it that way. And so he was addressing this idea. And of course, there's that independent spirit that Americans have. I will go it alone. I will do it myself, raise myself by my bootstraps, and so forth. And so he was addressing this idea that was kind of out there poetically and enticingly, which was that one could receive the words of God through the bubbling brook and through the stones of the mountain and through the blooming flowers and such things. And he addresses it in this quote. And, you know, just to jump to the chase, before we can get there, we have to be qualified for that. You know, we all know the story of the Avadut from the Uddhava Gita, uh, who goes out and he's already a highly realized being, and he takes 24 teachers in nature. Well, he had human teachers too. Anyway, he takes these 24 teachers in nature, and he can do that because his mind by then has become its own guru. But we don't want to jump to this too fast. Swamiji says, the inadequacy of books, and if he was here right now in this lifetime, he would say, and also videos, the inadequacy of books to quicken spiritual growth is the reason why, although almost every one of us can speak most wonderfully on spiritual matters, when it comes to action, and the living of a truly spiritual life, we find ourselves so awfully deficient. To quicken the spirit, the impulse must come from another soul. Then he quotes, the true preacher of religion has to be of wonderful capabilities, and clever shall his hearer be. That's from the Katha Upanishad. And when both of these are really wonderful and extraordinary, then will a splendid spiritual awakening result, and not otherwise. Such alone are the real teachers, and such alone are also the real students, the real aspirants. All others are only playing with spirituality. They have just a little curiosity awakened, just a little intellectual aspiration kindled in them, but are merely standing on the outward fringe of the horizon of religion. This is also in Bhakti Yoga. So the guru is necessary. The human embodied guru is necessary because before we reach that place where our own mind has that level of discrimination and detachment, we can be swayed. Think about that chart in the hierarchy of existence. Those three different kinds of jivatmans, Pashu and Virya, they are still affected by Maya. So they need guidance. So what is it that shows, what are the qualifications that a guru has that we can trust in? So again, Swamiji says something important, because we know that there are different grades of teachers. There's the highest. How many of us are fortunate enough to be born and also to be companions to a divine incarnation? Very few. So then we work through lineages and we take a qualified teacher. But to be honest, and this is really true in the West, how many of us know how to discriminate between an authentic teacher and one who's not so authentic? The very fact, and I have to say that the very fact that we might even be thinking that way shows that we've got some discernment in us, um, and that we want to rise above desire and um, the passions, etc. So, because it's also true that if we are fully governed by desires and we have no discernment at all, then we might just naturally choose a teacher that's going to cater to that. So let's look at who the real teachers are. Let's jump to the chase here, and let's start again with one of Swamiji's, Vivekananda's quotes. He says, "The teachers whose wisdom and truth shine like the light of the sun are the very greatest the world has known, and they are worshipped as God by the majority portion of mankind. But we may get help from comparatively lesser ones also. Only we ourselves do not possess intuition enough to judge properly of the person from whom we receive teachings and guidance." Just think about how the gunas might affect us if we haven't uh, gotten control of our minds with regard to the way uh, balance, restlessness, and inertia affect the mind. Then that's going to affect our choices in life at any given moment. He says, so he continues, "So there ought to be certain tests, certain conditions for the teacher to satisfy, as there are also for the taught." And that's a really important point. So let me share my screen again, and we'll take a look at this important teaching. When I first came to Vedanta, I was studying at the ashram, the Portland Vedanta Society, where Swami Asheshanandaji Maharaj was the minister. He was the last living monastic disciple of Holy Mother, and we had him in our midst. It was a tremendous boon. He was also Babaji's teacher. So for the SRV Sangha, uh, he's our Param Guru, kind of like our grandfather Guru. So I used to attend his lectures every Sunday that I was in town, which was most of them. And I can't remember that there was ever a lecture where Swami did not list these qualifications. So the qualifications are given right up here. These should be taken as universal. So whether you're Hindu, following a Hindu path, an Indian path, a Buddhist path, a following Islam, following Christianity, any tradition, indigenous, etc. Although the words might be different, this should be something that we can rely on. So the first one is that the teacher be without selfish motives. And Swamiji said, there should be no desire for name, fame, money. The teacher must work out of love alone, because love is the only medium through which spiritual force, he's talking about tejas, can be transmitted. Without that love, and as soon as it becomes, a bartering situation, a shopkeeping situation between a teacher and a student, then, that ability to transmit is either lost entirely or compromised. So there must be no selfish motives. The teacher must only desire that you gain enlightenment. And then they must be able to transmit the essence of the scriptures. No text torturing, no, as Swamiji said, Swami Vivekananda would say, don't take up a single word and then go through all its permutations. That's just for the delight of the intellect. What is needed is to transmit the essence of the scriptures, and then should lead a pure and simple life. So sinlessness, Swamiji had a lot to say about that. He said, in terms of purity and sinlessness, in the spiritual sciences, it is impossible in the spiritual sciences, it is impossible from the first to the last that there can be any spiritual light in a soul that is impure. What religion can an impure person teach? The sine qua non, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. The sine qua non of acquiring spiritual truth for oneself or for imparting it to others is the purity of heart and soul. A vision of God or a glimpse of the beyond never comes until the soul is pure. And then those are actually the three that he talks about in terms of the qualifications in Bhakti Yoga. But all along, he's been talking about how the teacher must be full of wisdom and a knower of Brahman, a knower of God. So this is the one, he stops here and he says, they must know the essence of the scriptures, they must lead a pure life, there must be no selfish motives. So when you see that in your teacher, then you know that you're in good hands. And then this other part of Brahman has to be there, of being a knower of Brahman, has to be there, and it has levels and stages. And so this is what I want to show, because it also relates to this idea that people have that they can go it alone. And if we look out at the great souls, almost all of them in a given lifetime have had a teacher. Even Sri Ramakrishna, who attained self-realization, God realization, went ahead and then took various teachers, showing us that we need to do this. And the teacher gives so much. We'll get to that in a minute with regard to protection and removing doubts and obstacles. So, in other words, if we don't have some of these, then we may not, probably are not qualified to go it alone, and we need the help of a soul who has. So, a Brahmavid is the first level in this teaching of the four levels of a knower of Brahman, and this is based upon the seven levels. Babaji has called this the four levels, but there are actually seven. And what he means by the four levels is that these are the bottom rung, the first stage that one would need to get to. So let's take a look at what each of those mean. Let me bring this down. There we go. So this first one, Shubecha, means that a teacher has right aspiration, that they possess detachment, knowledge of the scriptures, and wisdom. So we want to see that. The Brahmavid also has proper inquiry. That means they can, that Atma Vichara, that's going to the source, that they have proper inquiry. They have gained all virtues and know the nature of Maya and are able to contemplate Atman. So that's not as easy as it sounds. Oh, I'm going to meditate on the self. Well, for most people, in a workaday world with family, etc., that's not such an easy thing to do because the mind is constantly drawn out for one reason or another. But the qualified teacher has learned to do that. Tanu Manasa, peaceful mind, yeah, is free of desire, has mastered concentration, and has even transcended the mind. So, in order to guide others along the path, and what is the problem? The problem is the mind. It's also our great tool. As Holy Mother says, we have to take this mind with us on our way to realize Brahman. So, somebody who has transcended the mind and has concentration can help us, guide us along the way. So, then this next one, Sattvapadi, in different systems, it might be listed in level 2, but we'll go ahead and it's listed here, so we'll read it. This is illumined intelligence. So the light of Atman is shining in that mind, in that intelligence, has attained renunciation, has equality of vision, and non-dual truth. So these are the basics of a Brahmavid. Now I see that there's something's been texted. All right, let us continue on. So what about the qualification of the Tat? Let's go, looks like I have to go back to one of our charts. Oops, pardon me. So here's what Swamiji says about the qualification of the student. Now, that we usually here in SRV, we usually hear this in terms of the 4 treasures and 6 jewels, otherwise called the sadhana chatushtai, the 4 qualifications of the student. And this is extremely important because if we also, as students, don't have any level of qualification, then we're not going to hear the teacher right. And so, the bottom line qualification is going to be sincerity and perseverance and trust and humility. Humility is so important, especially if our mind is still clouded by the gunas, still clouded by the passions, that we, if we have the ability to set aside those lower movements of the ego and wait it out if necessary, take ourselves to the teacher, then we're going to make progress. So here's what Swami Vivekananda has to say. The conditions necessary for the Tat are purity, a real thirst after knowledge, and perseverance. A real thirst after knowledge. He doesn't mention, he's going to mention humility, because a real thirst after knowledge has to include humility, because otherwise we're going to have arrogance there. And we might say, want the teacher to be impressed with what we know, and then we get put off if the teacher doesn't recognize what we know. So humility is really important. So the conditions necessary for the Tat are purity, a real thirst after knowledge, and perseverance. No impure soul can be really religious. Purity in thought, speech, and act is absolutely necessary for anyone to be religious. This goes by another name. It's called yoga, not asana, but union, yoga, that union of thought, word, and deed. So most of us coming to the teacher are not going to have that in spades yet. We're not going to be perfected in that. But so long as we are trying, this is really important. So sincerity is another piece to this. As to the thirst after knowledge, it is an old law that we all get whatever we want. None of us can get anything other than what we fix our hearts upon. To pant for religion, truly, is a very difficult thing. Not at all so easy as we generally imagine. Hearing religious talks or reading religious books is no proof yet of a real want felt in the heart. There must be a continuous struggle, a constant fight, an unremitting grappling with our lower nature, till the higher want is actually felt and the victory is achieved. It is not a question of 1 or 2 days, of years, or of lives. The struggle may have to go on for hundreds of lifetimes. The success sometimes may come immediately, but we must be ready to wait patiently, even for what may look like an infinite length of time. The student who sets out with such a spirit of perseverance will surely find success and realization at last. So there's a whole bunch of stories that deal specifically with this, but one of them is, we're to be like that person who had a feather and was determined to empty the ocean drop by drop with a feather. So we must have that perseverance. And then on a happier note, were the two aspirants who had meditated so long that anthills had grown up on them. And Narada, the Deva Rishi, was going off to visit Vishnu, and they recognized him. And the first one said, "Oh, Narada, would you ask the Lord when you see him how many more lifetimes I have?" And he said, "Sure, I'll do that." And then a little further on, he sees the other one in his anthill, and he asks the same thing, "Please ask the Lord how much longer I have." And he said, "Will do." So then when he comes back, that the second man that he spoke to, he said, "I have good news for you. The Lord said you have only 3 more lifetimes." And the man just lost it. And he just was weeping and wailing that, 3 more lifetimes. But Narada walked on, and he came to the first one, and he said, I have news for you. It may not be that good, but see that tree over there? See all the leaves on that tree? Well, the Lord says that you have as many lifetimes as the leaves on that tree. And the man went into ecstasy, said, "Really? Is that all?" And in that moment, he was illumined. So we have to have that kind of perseverance. So yeah, so it's very important that we also qualify ourselves to understand the teacher. One of the secrets of spiritual life is that when we hear something from the scriptures, the revealed scriptures, or from our teacher, or read something of an illumined saying from some seer, that we hear it with the attitude to understand it. In the beginning, we may not understand it, and we may, especially as Westerners, it's almost as if uh, we're taught that the sign of intelligence is to poke holes in things. If we can find a flaw in the argument, a flaw in the statement, then somehow, we've proved that we're intelligent. And that's not how it works in spiritual life. If you trust your teacher, you see that your teacher has these qualifications, then when you listen to your teacher, and unbeknownst to you, you're in a rajasic or a tamasic state, and you don't understand it, or you go, "How could that be true?" And you start to find fault with it, then you're not going to make any progress. As soon as the mind rears up that kind of habit, we have to stop it and set it aside and listen to the rest. Because there's plenty of people who think the teacher is absolutely wonderful when they first meet him or her. and they love everything they hear, and then they hear one thing that they don't like, and then they leave because of that. And in many cases, it's because they didn't hear it right because of the state their mind was in at that time, or they hadn't learned enough of everything that is the foundation to that. Spiritual life, especially, well, no, I won't say especially, there's a lot of different elements to the scriptures, to the teacher, to the teachings. There's so much to integrate. In the beginning, it may be so new to us that we only get one thing that the teacher says. And then if we hear something else and we don't see how it connects, we have to not find fault with that. You know, if, go to the teacher and ask for explanation. Uh, that's important. Continue to follow the practice, or put it on the back burner and just wait. And don't be like those people who take 1% and throw everything that they don't like and throw everything else away. So it's a caution, especially for those of us in the West. So here we are, we've got 7 minutes left, and it's time to start on initiation. And somehow I thought we were going to get all the way through these three: guru, initiation, and mantra. But maybe I had a secret desire not to do that because these are really big and important topics, and we want to do them justice. So let me just share a little bit about initiation. How do you talk about the guru without talking about initiation, by whatever name is used? I mean, those two things go together. So drawing for some of this verse, I drew from a chapter that Babaji wrote for the the Sword of the Goddess uh, manuscript, which I've mentioned before. It kind of got turned into the Footfalls book. So anyway, so he talks about in very great and wonderful detail about these three requisites. And as he's broaching the topic of all of it, and he presents it in a very integrated way. Guru, initiation, and mantra are kind of woven together. Anyway, he says, the actual act of initiation, called diksha or mantra diksha, not only signals an all-important turning point in the renunciation of the world and detachment from its allures and sufferings, but it is the definitive, auspicious moment in the entire evolution of the soul, which has journeyed long and hard through many lifetimes. In the language of Tantra, it is the moment of involution where the soul stops circling in the vortex of time, amidst space, due to causality, set in a temporal sub-reality, what we're experiencing here. It then plunges inward to find the source of origin beyond creative principles. And we'll go into a little more detail about this, but I want to just list. He gives this teaching out of Tantra that it was the first time I ever remember coming across it. And he describes it as the four practices or results or purposes of initiation. And this is part of what Tantra calls, it comes out of the Tantra Sadhana Shastras. In other words, the scriptures of Tantra dealing with sadhana. And so these four are meaning, primary directive, secondary directive, and result. So initiation should lead to all of these. And just in brief, in fact, let me tell you, Holy Mother kind of sums it all up in a very quick line. She says, the true purpose of initiation is to try and realize God through sincere spiritual effort. So we might think, I've come to the teacher, I've gotten initiated, it's all done for me now, I can just relax. No, that's not what's supposed to happen. So now, what is meaning in that list of four? The word is sada, to exert and to strive. And this requires that we have a desire to be free from suffering. And if one has a sincere desire to be free, to be liberated, then spiritual practice, sadhana, is absolutely necessary, as it is what draws the attention of God and Guru. The second one is called the primary directive, which is given the name siddhi, meaning perfection here, not marijuana or powers. It has to do with perfection. So this means attaining spiritual perfection. And the secondary directive, which is the third of these four, is the freedom from cycles of karma and rebirth. So far we have the meaning, which is to exert and strive for realization. The primary directive is to attain spiritual perfection. The secondary directive, which will come along with it, is freedom from the cycles of karma and rebirth. And finally, the definitive result. Tantra states that this definitive result is the awakening of Kundalini Shakti, leading to the revelation of the Atman within. So we will close there with prayer. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasuma Jyotirgamaya Mrichurma Mritam Gamaya Abhira Bhira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth, from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real. Lead us from the illusion of death to realization of eternal perfection, eternal existence. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So let me turn off the recording.